Can objects be haunted? Yeah, I think so. For me, it was a small table I bought at a thrift store. I didn't really need it, but I'd never seen anything that looked like it before. I decided to continue shopping, and if I came back and it was still there, then I figured it was a sign for me to buy it. It was still there. I took it home, happily set it on the floor, and all was well, for a while. The table folded down, and I had to open the top to secure it with a latch. The latch worked, but it only took a little pressure on the table for the top to close again. I took it upon myself to repair the latch. I was able to do so, but ended up cutting my finger. While I was bleeding, I kept thinking that this should have been an easy fix. Then I shrugged it off and started putting things on the table. I had placed the table so that when I came downstairs, it was one of the first things that I'd see. I noticed that each time I looked at it, I began feeling uneasy. Something was not right. This happened every time I came downstairs, and I found myself avoiding the table as much as possible when I had to walk past it. One day, I sat down in a nearby chair and just stared at the table. As beautiful as it was, I sensed that it had a nasty history. This is the risk you take when you buy things secondhand. Yes, the item may have more character than something brand new, but you don't know where it's been, what kind of energy it has attached to it. My intuition told me that the table had been in a home where great violence had occurred. Possibly it had had bloodshed onto it. Specifically, I perceived a husband brutally killing his wife in a crime of passion. The table itself, of course, was an innocent piece of wood, but it had endured horrific pain and rage from its former owners. I wondered what amount of white sage or Palo Santo it was going to take to purify this table or satisfy its lust for blood, as it had already drawn some of mine. It wasn't worth it, I decided, and I ended up getting rid of it. And what do you know? All was right again. My husband and I had a haunted bed. We owned an antique shop and bought a bunch of furniture from one guy. When you buy a whole lot, sometimes you'll have to take some things you don't want. In the lot was an old reproduction Jenny Lind bed. This bed wasn't old enough to put in the shop, so we stored it in the back for quite a while. Meanwhile, we were building a house, and when it was finished, we decided to make use of the bed until we found an older one. Right away, during the night, I would wake up and feel the bed vibrating silently. It had the old metal box springs, so I thought at first that I must have made the bed do that by turning over. But as time went on, I would lie perfectly still, and the bed would keep vibrating. Just the slightest shaking, nothing crazy or violent. Most times I would wake up my husband, and it would stop shaking immediately, which was really frustrating for me, since I was the only one experiencing it. It kept doing it off and on for weeks. I know it sounds scary, but somehow it wasn't. It was more like dumbfounding. Like, is this really happening? It can't be. But it was. And then there came a point, in addition to the shaking, something new was added. Down at the foot of the bed on my husband's side, there began a clanging sound, as if someone was hitting the metal springs with another metal object. Not violently at first, more of a clang, 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 then silence. I tried to wake up my husband, but it would always stop, which was really weird. In my mind, I'm trying to figure out what could possibly be causing this. I'd heard about ghosts, of course, but that thought was the furthest out for a rational explanation. We lived at the base of a mountain with millions of acres of Forest Service land behind us, and on a dead-end road. There was pure silence every night. No traffic, no nearby trains. And earthquakes, they don't happen every night on cue and only shake one item. What the hell was going on? The clanging began to get louder as time went on, and finally, hallelujah, one night, it didn't stop when I woke up my husband. It continued, and he looked at me like, what the hell? One day I ran into a woman who said that she was a psychic. I told her about the bed. I had almost zero faith in psychics at the point, but whatever. I asked her if she wanted to come over and check it out. With another friend, who also purported to be psychic, these two women came into the bedroom and stood there for a few minutes. One of them finally spoke and told me there was an old woman in the room who believed that the bed was hers, and she was trying to scare us out of it. Right away I thought, yeah, right, but I was polite about it. They burned sage and told the old woman to go away, go to the light, blah blah. I was not impressed, to say the least, but I figured I had nothing to lose. Funny thing, it stopped immediately. Then, about 2 weeks later, it did it one night, and my thoughts of the bogus reading were confirmed. But after that one night, it never happened again. I thought back about what she had said about the woman wanting us out of it. The bed was from the 30s or 40s, and she said the woman was old. It would stop shaking, clanging, as soon as a man, my hubby, was awake. If you go back to that era, women had very few rights, and men had the power. Women could easily have been afraid to tell their husbands, and would do anything not to upset them. So it began to make sense that the sounds would stop. If this is right, I think she became desperate to get us out of her bed when she started the clanging noises. She no longer cared if the man would be angry or not. Of course, this is all speculation on my part, but since there's already no explanation of why a bed would do that, the story doesn't matter. So, did a ghost do it? Something was responsible for it, and it wasn't either of us. Any suggestions are welcome. I truly cannot understand why this happened. We're not crazy people. I'm not lying. Nothing to gain by making myself sound like a fool. We built the house ourselves out of 2 old hewn log buildings, and both of us knew every square inch of that house and knew that it had nothing to do with the house settling or moving. Besides, houses don't settle like that. So that's my story about my haunted bed, and I'd love to know what and why it happened.